It is that time of year where we are diving into some divisional crossover episodes, and this time we're kicking things off with the Vancouver Canucks.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you so much for joining me here as we are going to jump right into Trevor Beggs of Locked On Canucks joining me, and we're going to talk all about the Flames, the Canucks, where they're going to finish in the division, who's more beloved, Tanev or Markstrom, does Thatcher Demko have what it takes to be one of the top goaltenders in the West, and more. So make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames and Locked On Canucks wherever you're getting your podcasts. And, of course, enjoy the episode. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to a Locked On Flames and Locked On Canucks crossover. As always, I'm your Locked On Flames host, Jess Belmosto, joined by one half of Locked On Canucks, Trevor. Trevor, how are you?
Jess, I'm fantastic. It's nice to see your face. It's big year for you, doing lots of Locked On Flames. I know you got a little promotion as well, or another job. So onwards and upwards for Jess. I don't know if it's onwards and upwards for the Flames though.
No, it's we're kind of stuck. We're just in neutral. I don't know if they even know it's the off season, to be entirely honest. But the Canucks, I feel like I haven't seen much movement from them either.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think everyone's used to the Canucks being a bit of a tire fire. Like there's always something dramatic, always something interesting going on in Vancouver. And, this offseason, I think it was strange, like you said, because there wasn't a lot of big, crazy moves that like rocked your socks. I mean, obviously the biggest one was buying out Oliver Eckman Larson, which in fairness is it's the largest regular or ordinary buyout in NHL history. So that was big. That was big.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's been, kind of some tinkering around the edges. And I think the Canucks, much like the Flames, they're kind of stuck in that mushy middle right now. But again, the bar's been so low in Vancouver for so long that the fact that they didn't make, disastrous moves this offseason, at least it doesn't appear like they have, that's got to be considered a win for this franchise based on what we've gone through.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's nice to have a general manager that isn't just like foot on the gas. I don't know, like I'm just doing things for the immediate future and not thinking about the long-term repercussions, because I don't think either team are in a win now kind of window.
No, I certainly don't think so. And, kind of one of the questions I want to ask you is, I guess it's more short-term and long-term, but which team is going to be better next season? I think that's a fascinating question to me because you look at the Pacific Division, and there's a clear-cut top three, I think, right? It's Edmonton, Vegas, and LA. And I would say that Seattle, Calgary, and Vancouver are in the same group. They're all in the same category. I could see any of those teams kind of being 4, 5, 6 in the division. Long-term is a different question, but maybe I'll ask you, where do you think the Flames and Canucks slot in the Pacific next season?
Last season I said, the Flames are going to win the division again. If not, they'll be second. So I'm going to keep the bar low. I'll say like 4, 5. I really don't want to have high expectations or really any expectations because I don't know what they're putting out on the ice.
Yeah, that's fair to say for sure, because I think the Flames have it usually it's the Canucks that have all this turmoil, but now it's the Flames, right?
Yeah.
You look at the Flames and Gaudreau leaves, Tkachuk leaves. Now it's like Lindholm, Hanifin, who's next, right? So
yeah,
the Flames are in a confusing position for sure.
Yeah, it's like the Flames just absorbed a bunch of Canucks players and like the chaos just followed with them.
That's what you get.
Yeah, seriously, like, and then you have the social media team like making jokes and everything. And I'm like, no, please, karma is gonna like hit us like a freight train, and it has. But what does the Canucks roster maybe look like to start the season? Is this going to be a younger team? Is it going to be it's slightly more competitive? Is it going to be worse?
I think right now it's August. It's mid-August. I'm probably more optimistic about the Canucks than you are about the Flames, I would say. I just think so much has gone wrong in Vancouver over the past couple of seasons, right? I mean, this was a team on the rise with, the same
Yeah.
pillars, Hughes, Pettersson, and Demko back in 2019-20. And for a barrage of reasons, which usually lead back to Jim Benning, this team has kind of gone in the opposite direction. But the pillars of the franchise are still there. Pettersson, one of the best centers, one of the best players in the game. Hughes is one of the best defensemen in the game, and Demko obviously had a really off year last year and was injured for a good chunk of the year. But I think Demko might be the biggest X factor for the Canucks because he has the potential to be one of the best goalies in the NHL. And Jess, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a little Locked On poll recently about ranking the best goaltenders in the league, and I think there was 12 or 15 goaltenders on the list. Thatcher Demko was not one of them. Flame Jacob Markstrom was up there, but that was one of the biggest things for me is that Demko got disrespected on the Locked On list there. Didn't even make it.
That to me, that's crazy. Like that's just that feels very out of pocket for no offense, Locked On NHL hosts, but that does not seem fair. I think that Thatcher Demko is absolutely one of the strongest goaltenders, and who really, he's still young and has that room to grow. And, especially coming back from an injury, I feel like if this team does make a run or, has any sort of success, it's because of him. And obviously, Flames fans know you need good goaltending, slightly above average goaltending even, just to save a few goals and win a few extra games and get those points. And I think Thatcher Demko can do a lot more than just that.
Yeah, he totally can. I mean, I think if you look at him before last season, he was easily a top 10 goalie in the NHL. And, when you ask about, what are the Canucks going to be this season? Are they going to be better? It starts with their best players, right? But I think with Hughes and Pettersson, you expect them to be two of the best players in the game. Demko of that trio is a bit of a wild card just because he had a bad year last year. But, if Hughes and Pettersson and Demko are all going, I think that on its own could make the Canucks a playoff team, although that's probably a bit optimistic because, it's a team sport and there's, 23 other guys on the roster. So I certainly have some questions, I guess, in terms of the defense they put together. I think, again, some tepid optimism that, Soucy was a good value add. He could play top 4, Ian Cole in a 1-year deal. Like those moves are fine in a nutshell, but I still look at the Canucks top 4 of, let's say it's Hughes, Soucy, Cole, and Hronek, and it's better, but is it a playoff defense? That I'm unsure of.
Anything is possible in hockey, and I think that the last few years have really shown that. And anything's possible. You can get really good or you can get really bad in a matter of a season. But I think the Canucks are just such an interesting case to look at because there was a lot of bad things happening. It felt like any time there was a press release or any sort of rumblings, not just Canucks fans, but just every hockey fan really was like, oh, this is bad. This is going to be real bad.
Yeah, and I think from the outside looking in, obviously, the Boudreau saga was one of the biggest stories for the Canucks last season, right? And it's interesting looking at it in hindsight, Jess, because I think at the time everyone was up in arms. Like, how could the Canucks do this to Boudreau? And you can see that point, right? Because the news got out, and it's like one of the nicest guys in hockey is getting put through the ringer. It was a very weird situation, and a number of players have touched on it since about just how dysfunctional and negative it was to play hockey in Vancouver last season. So I think the timing was off for sure. Not to mention, Bedard's at the top of the draft, and the Canucks just start winning these meaningless games. So there's definitely reasons to hate the move. At the end of the day, the timing was probably not right, but it was probably the right move to get rid of Boudreau and bring in Rick Tocchet.
Yeah.
Again, we'll see if Tocchet's actually the guy. I'm not convinced over, the Canucks playing well while having the second easiest schedule in the league over the second half of the season there. But I do think Tocchet, again, is bringing a bit more structure to the team. You can kind of see it in the way they're playing right now. There's tepid optimism in Vancouver for sure, but just a lot of recent pain in this market that's kind of blinding that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can talk more about that next because we're going to talk about this whole new era going on in Vancouver. But before we do that, let's take a quick break and talk about FanDuel. football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can just pick any team to win the Super Bowl. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over, under, and more. Who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl, Trevor?
You know what? The Buffalo Bills, they got to do it one of these years, They got to do it. And I think people are maybe sleep on them a little bit right now here in August.
All right, we'll come back and revisit the tape here. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us in this crossover episode of Locked On Flames and Locked On Canucks. We are just cruising through the off season here. And we talked about the turmoil and changes in Vancouver. What have been some really significant positive steps that this organization has taken?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned one off the top, the Oliver Eckman Larson buyout. And I think one of the reasons why that was such a big deal is not many people expected it to happen just because of the money involved. The Canucks now paying this guy $20 million over the next 4 years not to play for this team. It's a lot of money. But I think it was the time to do it. I know a lot of other pundits in this market didn't think it was going to happen, but this is really the offseason that they had to do it if they were going to buy out Oliver Eckman Larson. And I know it's a steep cap penalty, especially in years 4 and 5 of the buyout. I did say they were paying for the next 4 years, actually the next 8 years. But with Oliver Eckman Larson, I think he was just he was a bad player. He was really bad for this team last season. He couldn't keep up, he couldn't defend, he was constantly turning the puck over. And I think the Athletics player card model kind of highlighted this. They pegged his value at, basically like negative $600,000 on a basically. And again, this guy's making $7.26 million for the Canucks. So when you think about how expensive this buyout is, I think like this is a guy making over $7 million who shouldn't even be playing in the league right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, I hope he finds his game in Florida. I know he had some injury problems here last year, but it was a terrible trade. It's a brutal contract. And this is the offseason to get out of it. I mean, the Canucks saved $7.1 million in cap space by buying out Oliver Eckman Larson this year. So that's a big step in the right direction. And I guess the other big move recently was signing Andrei Kuzmenko. I know, 32 teams were after this guy, but the fact that Patrick Allvin was able to court him, he chose Vancouver, and he had an amazing season last year. I think that's one of the big recent wins for this franchise as well.
Yeah, and I think what can kind of get lost in all of this is how tight the cap is. When you're just kind of reading articles, and you want your teams to make moves, but there are so many moving parts to this that like everyone has to be on the same page in order for these things to happen. And I think you're completely right. It was the right time for OEL to be bought out. I think that 2 years ago, I think 2 or 3 probably at this point, I saw a video of him at camp struggling to keep up with everyone. And I will never forget that. Whenever anyone says, Oliver Eckman Larson, that's all I think about. Him just being slow and not a valuable player, unfortunately.
It was constantly a problem in Vancouver last year. And not only was he a problem, but he was playing top 4 minutes. And alongside Tyler Myers, who also isn't very good. And they were facing some of the toughest competition in the NHL. It was a tire fire waiting to happen. I know that pairing kind of magically figured it out for a bit in 2021-22, where they were passable for a stretch. But I mean, they were one of the worst duos in the league defensively last season, and the Canucks got shelled because of it. I mean, they gave up. If you look at like scoring chances of games, expected goals of games, the Canucks are basically a bottom 3, bottom 5 team, and a lot of that is because Eckman Larson and Myers were playing 20 plus minutes a night.
And that's so bad.
Yeah.
I think for Flames fans, that would be like Lucic cracking like 15 minutes a night. Even though he was a forward, he was still such a liability and doing all the same things as those 2 defensemen. Just you don't want to see it. Who do you think takes the next step in their game? Like this, is it going to be Thatcher Demko?
I mean, I think it has to be Demko. That's the most important guy in terms of taking a step. I almost feel like it's a bit of a cop-out to say taking a step. I think it's just rediscovering his game because he was so good for a real stretch there from, bubble Demko through the last couple seasons up until, the first half of last year.
Yeah.
So I think Demko's the easy answer for sure in terms of like who's going to take the next step, because for the Canucks, he has to. In terms of other players, I kind of look at a guy like Brock Besser, to be honest. I think Brock Besser has the cachet around the league. He's got the great hair, the great rookie season, but he's had a down performance the last couple of years, right? And he kind of cursed himself at the beginning of last offseason when he was asked at training camp, it's this year you score 30 goals. And he's like, yeah, this is the year. And then from there on out, he didn't even hit 20, right? So so much has gone on with Besser, from, injury issues to obviously his father being in ill health and passing away. So guy's been through a lot. Trade rumors last season. Like, he got scratched. He got healthy scratch on Hockey Fights Cancer Night, then gets inserted back to the lineup at the last minute. And to me, like, that was even one of the wildest memories for me of the season. So I was in the locker room after the game in the scrum with Besser, and I think he had 2 goals in that game, even though he was supposed to be healthy scratch and ended up going back in the last second. And he's given this big emotional answer about how much it meant to him to play on Hockey Fights Cancer Night, like with, thinking of his dad and everything. And then, like, one of the next questions in the scrum, like, I cringed so hard. Someone's like, so there's this trade rumor about you right now with your agent. And he got asked, and obviously he was super upset. So I think he was angry, pissed off, not performing well, fed up for a number of reasons. I hope he can turn the page. Now he's kind of rescinded his trade request. He said he wants to play here long term. And I think people forget too, Pettersson and Besser a few seasons ago were one of the best duos in hockey. So I see a path for Besser to take a next step. And I think that for that to happen, he's got to play alongside Pettersson. And I think that's the best spot for him, the Canucks lineup. I mean, I personally have been touting this for a while, but I'd love to see the Canucks load with that top line, Kuzmenko, Pettersson, and Besser. I think that's the best way to, have one of the best first lines in hockey, and a way to get the most out of Besser as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that just is miles ahead of the Flames top line.
But you guys did have one of the best lines in hockey, not too long ago.
Yeah, it's the fall from grace has been painful. I really want to see, or I think that we're going to see, a Thatcher Demko and Jake Ottinger. Like, they're going to be the top 2 names in the West, goaltending wise, I think, over these next few years.
Yeah, I think they're certainly on that trajectory. I mean, that you could argue they're almost already there, right? Again, Demko didn't do himself any favors last season, but I think a key for both of them too is not to play too much, right? I think Dallas has played Ottinger a bit too much. They suffered a bit in the playoffs last season because of it. And with Demko too, it's been a problem as well. I mean, last season, part of the reason the Canucks were so bad is, they didn't have anyone behind Demko, right? Martin was good as a backup. All of a sudden he's a starter and he's the worst goalie in hockey. So I think, for Demko and Ottinger to be 2 of the best goalies in the West, I agree with you. I think they can get there, or they're almost already there, but their teams need to not play them so much. And again, similar problem in Calgary with Markstrom on some occasions. I know Vladar has kind of stepped up a bit more in like the last season or so.
Yeah, so last year I think it was 56 games he started, but the season before it was 63.
Yeah.
I get it. He was having a phenomenal season. You don't want to take that away. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And Daryl Sutter is known for just riding his goalies into the ground, and we're still trying to figure out if that broke Markstrom, and we'll find out sooner rather than later here. But I'm very interested to see where both of these organizations go, just because it's tough. It's not always sunshine and winning games, and it's tough in a Canadian market. Players, if you're not an attractive team, players aren't going to want to go there. And that, again, makes it harder. But anything else before we move on to the final segment?
No, let's get to this final segment. I know a couple more questions in my notebook. A little Flames Canucks fun here coming up. Let's go.
All right. Well, make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Flames and Locked On Canucks wherever you're getting your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. And we're going to round out the show here. I'm nervous for these questions.
All right, let's dive into the first one here. So I want to set the contract aside because I think, JT Miller and Jonathan Huberdeau both signed these massive deals, and Huberdeau's is obviously looking worse right now. But I'm curious, just contract aside, which player would you rather have on your team? Would you rather have JT Miller? Or would you rather have Jonathan Huberdeau?
I feel like saying Huberdeau is a cop-out, but I mean, I really do like JT Miller. I feel like, he would be a lot more effective.
I think JT Miller's got the versatility, right? That's it. I think Huberdeau's probably got a higher ceiling. I believe he's a year younger, maybe, but they're close to the same age. But again, Huberdeau with that 115-point season, now making the big bucks. The ceiling's there, but JT Miller again I think he almost gets a little underappreciated in Vancouver just because of all the trade rumors and the negativity in this market. But you look at the last 4 seasons, and he's like a top 15 scorer in this league.
Yeah,
I mean, he's been really consistent for the Canucks.
Yeah, that's what the Flames don't have. They don't have a finisher. They don't have anyone that's, a shoot first kind of guy. And I mean, unfortunately, they lost that in Tkachuk, and Toffoli was a good placeholder, but you lost him too. And what are you replacing that with? It's just they're digging themselves a deeper hole.
Yeah, 100%. And I shouldn't say JT Miller's been a model consistent. He's definitely had his ups and downs in this market a little bit, but for Jonathan Huberdeau, it's been mostly down so far. Do you have hope that Huberdeau can kind of refine that form? Like, do you think he's going to get back to being maybe not a 100-point player, but like an 80 to 90-point player?
I think so. Even if it's like 75, 80, like I'll be okay with that. Obviously 30, 31 years old, you're not your true prime anymore. And I think that last season, a lot of it really was the culture shock from going from sunshiny Florida that you spent your entire career in to going to, oh my God, it's winter, like 6 months out of the year. And being in that locker room with a coach that did not like you, that did not like the kid that you were mentoring. It didn't sound like he liked his job, and just kind of didn't like anything. It was bad. And it's not just him who said it. It's been pretty much every player that's come out and talked to media at some point this summer. And he said it himself. He didn't just forget how to play hockey. So I really do think we're going to see the old Jonathan Huberdeau again.
We'll see how it happens. Obviously, like you said, a new coach can do wonders sometimes. A couple other veterans in that locker room are former Canucks, obviously, Jacob Markstrom and Chris Tanev. Which Canuck turned Flamed is more beloved? Is it Tanev? Is it Markstrom? Or is it someone aside from those two?
That's so hard because I feel like both of them are so beloved. Chris Tanev is just one of those guys that truly would play until his limbs are falling off on the ice. And I think that he has just been so good for Calgary and the penalty kill and really bringing Oliver Kylington's game to another level. And he did miss last season, but he's coming back. So I'm really excited what the two of them can do together this year. But Markstrom, I think I like him more, or just I like them both. But Markstrom, he is a really cute kid, so that kind of just takes the cake there. But I think they're both pretty much equally beloved. I have seen more Markstrom jerseys, but he did sign like a 6-year deal. So
yeah, I think goalies always get a bit more hate too, right? If the team's not doing well, the goalie's obviously taking some flack, and he's kind of gone from Vezina worthy to more league average the last little bit. So I can see there being more love and more hate for Jacob Markstrom, but it's hard not to love Chris Tanev, like you said. The guy is just an all-time beauty.
He's great.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think Markstrom too, the issue that a lot of people had last year was him leaving the crease and trying to play the puck or sliding. It was a slip and slide game, to the neutral zone to play the puck. And everyone was like, what are you doing? But, it's a new season almost. So we'll see if those old habits are gone.
Fair enough. So we talked about the Flames veterans here. Obviously, I think their core is probably a bit older. Can the
Mhm.
Flames make one last run with the core that they have or the team that they have without going through a major rebuild? Or is it just time to start looking towards the future in Calgary?
No. I think that it is time. It has been time for a rebuild. This is an entirely different core than it was 3 years ago. Giordano, Gaudreau, Tkachuk, Sean Monahan, those were their guys, and everyone kept saying, you need to blow it up. You need to blow it up and just get the assets and really start a rebuild. Those guys aren't on the team anymore. And they got nothing really in return for any of them except Tkachuk. And, it hasn't really worked out for them. They do think they're going to get younger, bringing up some of their AHL guys, which I think is great. But are they ready? That's the real question. And I don't know. I don't think any of them are ready to play a full 82 game season.
Yeah, it's like I said, I don't want to discount Calgary because you kind of alluded to it earlier, Jess, but I feel like every time I think Calgary's going to be bad, they're good, and every time you think they're going to be good, they're bad. They're just that team in the NHL right now. So I think it's they're a hard team to count out because of it, but it's hard also to look at that team and be incredibly optimistic about the future.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I've been covering the team since right before the pause in 2020, and the one thing that I've noticed is a pattern. It's they're good one year, bad the next, good and then bad. So based on past patterns, they're expected to be good. But I'll believe it when I see it.
Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens. I'll say it right now, and maybe I'm throwing some shade, but I would pick the Canucks ahead of the Flames in the Pacific next season.
I could see
my
it.
My August optimism, perhaps, but
yeah. I mean, I don't see it by a landslide of points. No. I think it'll be, if anything, a handful, 2 or 4, maybe 6. I don't know. They lose 17 games in overtime again. Could be even more. So, I mean, do you expect the Canucks to do anything else before opening night?
I think they got to get cap compliant, right? So Kyle and I talked about that on Locked On Canucks a couple of days ago. And, a lot of teams are over the cap right now. I know Calgary's a couple 100,000 over the cap. Canucks are about 5 million over the cap. So I think Tanner Pearson's a big wild card, $3.25 million cap hit. Is he going to be on LTIR, or is he going to be healthy enough to play? Tucker Poolman's going to go on LTIR. So the Canucks can get cap compliant with the roster they have, although it's going to be incredibly tight.
Yeah.
It would help if they were able to move some money, but it's also who you're going to move, right? I mean, the Canucks also have shown that they want to be a playoff team next season. So are you going to trade out Beauvillier or Garland in a cap dump,
Right.
Is anyone going to take on Myers? Probably without giving up an asset. So it's I have trouble seeing them making a big move. I could see a guy like Jack Rathbone, who's waiver eligible, being traded or waived or something like that. But that's not a move that's going to really move the needle in terms of the cap. So I'm curious to see if anything happens, but I'm not predicting that much is going to happen in terms of moving before the beginning of the season. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, same over here. I mean, really, Craig Conroy said he didn't want to go into next offseason with 7 UFAs. Well, he's down to 6. So I guess he's living up to his word. And, if Elias Lindholm does sign an extension, then we're having a whole different conversation. And that's a whole nother can of worms that I can't even try to unpack. But is there anything else before we wrap up today's show?
I think we've given our predictions and some thoughts on the season. Maybe quickly, do you have a favorite Canucks Flames memory?
The final 4 games that they played in the bubble in 2020, because
the little series. Oh yeah. One of the most depressing times in Canucks history. Oh no.
No, it was bad. I mean, I didn't think the Flames were going to make the playoffs, but it was just come on. These poor Canucks have been ravaged by COVID. Let their season end already. And I appreciated when it all ended.
Yeah.
What
It
about
was a
you?
memory for like, thank God it finally ended.
Exactly.
Oh, it's too funny. I think for me, it ended up being a good Calgary Flames moment. But when I was a kid back in 2004, Matt Cook, game 7, scores the game tying goal with 6 seconds left against Calgary. Jovanovski in the penalty box, cheering like a madman. And obviously that game didn't go in the Canucks' favor. But that one moment,
Yeah.
that still gives me goosebumps. So that's my number one Flames Canucks memory. Ended up
Yeah.
working out for the Flames, but in the Canucks at the end of the day. But that's life being a Canucks fan.
Well, thank you so much, Trevor, for joining us here on Locked On Flames. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at Trev Beggs, TrevBeggs. And aside from that, just follow Locked On Canucks wherever you listen to podcasts. It's Locked On Flames, Locked On Canucks. Let's hopefully all the Locked On Canadian podcasts, we can make some noise here coming up. So,
Let's do it.
yeah, just make sure you're following Locked On Canucks and following Locked On Flames. Let's go.
Let's have ourselves a season, and maybe we will meet again before the trade deadline when the Flames probably need to move some players.
You guys can have Tyler Myers for your run for 8th spot. No problem.
Yeah, you're going to have to talk big game to Craig Conroy about that one. But thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames and Locked On Canucks. I will see you tomorrow. We're just going to keep pushing through this wonderful off season. And thanks for hanging out.